towering peaks of some of the world's most formidable mountain ranges, lies a region that has long remained out of sight and out of mind, the Pamir Plateau, often referred to as the roof of the world. This vast high-altitude frontier is one of the most remote and misunderstood territories on the planet. But while it may have been overlooked for generations, the Pamir Plateau is now emerging from the shadows of history, stepping into the spotlight of 21st century geopolitics. What was once thought to be a desolate and irrelevant backwater has become a crucial chess piece in a game of global strategy. It's a story that intertwines imperial legacies, forgotten maps, high-stakes diplomacy, and the modern hunger for resources that power our digital and green economies. And it begins with a quiet, little-known handover of territory that would go on to change everything. The Pamir is located where the borders of modern-day China, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan intersect, have long stood as a geographic fortress. Towering above 4,000 meters, the region is infamous for its inhospitable terrain dominated by icy ridgelines, unpredictable permafrost, and treacherous weather patterns that make access nearly impossible for much of the year. Historically, few civilizations could tame or hold this region for long, yet it has always been far more than a blank spot on the map. In ancient times, the Pamir served as a keynote on the Silk Road, the ancient trade network that stitched together East and West. Caravans, diplomats, and explorers passed through this corridor, including Zhang Qian, the An dynasty, who laid the groundwork for China's first contacts with Central Asia. In the centuries that followed, China's Tang dynasty extended its influence deeper into the region, establishing the Yangtze Protectorate to maintain order and ensure the free flow of goods and culture across the mountains. But this foothold in the highlands would not last forever. As the Qing dynasty entered its twilight in the 19th century, it found itself increasingly besieged by external pressures and internal decay. The age of European imperialism was in full swing, and China's vast western territories became the subject of negotiation, coercion, and eventually outright seizure. In 1864, under duress, the Qing Empire signed the Treaty of Tarbagatai with Tsarist Russia, ceding over 440,000 square kilometers of strategic territory. The Pamirs, while not explicitly surrendered, were vulnerable to Russian occupation. And indeed, by 1892, Russian forces had taken control of more than 1,100 square kilometers in the eastern Pamirs, establishing a presence that would last through the Soviet era. China's response at the time was little more than a symbolic dotted line on a map and a deafening diplomatic silence. The region slowly vanished from China's administrative oversight, effectively abandoned at least on the surface. Under Soviet control, the Pamirs became a militarized frontier, but were never truly developed. When Tajikistan gained independence, in 1990, when the dissolute lands, instability, and a strain. But while the world moved on, China did not forget. Inside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, aging scrolls, hand-drawn maps, Qing-era military law, imperial, it's a piece of historical evidence suggesting that the fully later the accuracy of these records by aligning a long-dormant claim was reading with military posturing or brash nationalism. China chose a different path, one that reflects a more modern, calculated form of statecraft. Over the course of nearly 2 decades, China initiated a quiet, methodical campaign of diplomacy, slowly building an airtight, simultaneously deep bilateral ties with Tajikistan. By 2011, an agreement between Tajikistan formally acknowledged China's 150 kilometers of the eastern Pamirs. But unlike most territorial aggressive annexation, nor was it the result of military coercion. The handover was peaceful, legally grounded, and accompanied by promises of mutual development. It was, in effect, a diplomatic masterstroke. However, ink on the agreement had dried. In the years that followed, Chinese geological failing temperatures and rain with high. One of these teams struck the geological equivalent of gold, though it wasn't gold they found, at least not at first. At a depth of around 300 meters, their drills hit a substantial vein of lithium, a soft, silver-white metal, now regarded as the lifeblood of the 21st century economy. From electric vehicle batteries and energy storage systems to smartphones and laptops, Lithium is the essential ingredient that powers our modern lives, and the vein uncovered in the Pamirs wasn't a small deposit, it was massive, with a potential to reshape global supply chains. But that was just the beginning. Further explorations revealed a treasure trove of additional resources, including several rare earth elements, essential for everything from advanced electronics and military works and renewable energy infrastructure. Next generation, aerospace systems and 5G technology came the literal gold rush. Preliminary estimates put the region's gold reserves at over 300,000 tons, with a market value exceeding 1.2 trillion yuan. It was, by all accounts, a geoeconomic jackpot. The international response was swift. Publications like the Wall Street Journal hailed it as a geoeconomic windfall, noting with some astonishment that China had acquired through quiet diplomacy what other nations might have gone to war for. Western analysts admitted, often grudgingly, that this represented a new model of power projection, one that emphasized legal precedent and patient statecraft over brute force. Inside Tajikistan, however, reactions were more mixed. While some praised the deal for the development it brought, others expressed regret, arguing that their country had given up too much for too little, especially after the discovery of the region's immense natural wealth. But here too, China had prepared. The agreement included provisions for Tajikistan to receive 3% of all annual mining profits generated from the territory. More importantly, China began investing heavily in local infrastructure. One of the most ambitious projects was a 2,100-kilometer roadway linking the Tajik capital of Dushanbe to the Pamir frontier. This road cut travel time by 3 days and reduced freight and logistics costs significantly, saving the Tajik economy billions in annual trade expenses. But it wasn't just about roads. China built schools, hospitals, hydropower plants, and community centers, offering tangible improvements to the lives of people who had long been forgotten by their own central government. These were not flashy headline-grabbing projects, but they worked. Slowly but surely, China began to win over the hearts and minds of locals through results rather than rhetoric. This quiet approach stands in stark contrast to the past century of Chinese history. 100 years ago, China was humiliated on the global stage, forced to watch as foreign powers carved up its borders. Today, it's reclaiming lost territory not with armies, but with documents, diplomacy, and development. Lithium from the Pamir mines now fuels battery factories in Qinghai. Rare earth elements support tech innovation hubs in Sichuan. Gold reserves help fund industrial expansion. Even sites that once housed Qing military outposts, destroyed during the Russian incursions of the 19th century, have been rebuilt this time not for war, but as patriotic education centers to teach generations about the long arc of Chinese history and resilience. By 2025, the Pamirs had undergone yet another transformation. A new solar-powered drone station and high-altitude charging grid were inaugurated in the region, signaling a turn towards sustainable development. Along the new Belt and Road corridors, massive mining trucks now roll past herds of yaks under the gaze of snow-covered Pix images that once would have seemed surreal, but now reflect a deliberate fusion of tradition and technology. Yet, as with any rapid development, the region faces significant environmental challenges. Climate change is reshaping the Pamir ecosystem at an alarming rate. Rising temperatures are accelerating glacier melt, swelling rivers to dangerous levels, and washing away fragile pasture land. Native wildlife is displaced, and long-established communities are seeing their ancestral lands transformed. Environmental rehabilitation is costly, with an estimated 500 yuan required to restore each ton to disturbed earth. China has responded by implementing pilot programs focused on sustainable mining practices. AI-powered monitoring systems have been deployed to track ecological changes in real time, and remote operations are now powered increasingly by renewable energy sources. But the scale of the challenge demands more. In Tajikistan, political opposition occasionally questions the validity of the original border agreement, particularly as the region's value often undeniable benefits and a level of region once unthinkable. More than anything, the situation in the Pamirs demonstrates the effectiveness of long-term thinking in a world that too often prioritizes short-term gains. China's strategy in the Pamirs is a case study in 21st-century power dynamics. It shows that global influence can be wielded without military confrontation, that history, if carefully preserved and patiently defended, can become a tool of modern diplomacy, that even forgotten highlands can become and innovation forgotten corner of a node in China's Beijing east and west. Linking China with the nation borderland to strategic is the clearest example yet. China's evolving world stage just about history, a move of all. In the far reaches, nestled among the towering peaks of some of the formidable mountain ranges, lies a region that has long made of mind the Pamir as the world. This vast height is one of the most remote and misunderstood territories on the planet. But while it may have been overlooked for generations, the Pamir Plateau is now emerging from the shadows of history, stepping into the spotlight of 21st-century geopolitics. What was once thought to be a desolate and irrelevant backwater has become a crucial chess in a game of global strategy. It's a story that intertwines imperial legacies, forgotten maps, high-stakes is the power of a territory that would go on to change everything. The Pamir is located where the borders of modern-day China, Tajikistan, Afghanistan have a geographic meter. The reason formidable to by lines, unpredictable and treacherous weather patterns that make access nearly impossible for much of the year. Historically, few civilizations could tame or hold this region for long, yet it has always been Pamir, the aid network that gathers Caravans, diplomats, and explorers passed through this corridor, including Zhang Qian, the envoy, who says that China's influence deeper into the region, establishing the Yangtze Protectorate to maintain order and ensure the free flow of goods, but in the highlands, would not last forever. As the Qing dynasty entered its twilight in the 19th century, it found itself increasingly besieged by external pressures and internal decay. The age of European imperialism was in full swing, and China's vast western territories became the subject of negotiation, coercion, and eventually outright siege. In 1860, under duress, the Qing Empire Bagatai would arise for 440,000 soldiers while not explicitly left vulnerable. By 1882, Russian forces of miles and kilometers in the eastern Pamirs established a presence that would last through little more than a symbolic dotted line on a map and a definite. The region slowly vanished from China's administrative sight, effectively abandoned at least on the surface. Under Soviet control, the Pamirs became a militarized frontier, but were never. In 1991, following the dissolution of the USSR, it inherited these desolate, undergoverned lands, along with all the challenges they brought: political instability, economic hardship, and a sheer lack of resource rugged terrain. The archives of Beijing scrolls, hand-drawn maps, Qing-era military logs, and imperial edicts were quietly preserved. Its document a piece of historical evidence that the fully belonged under Chinese sovereignty. When satellite imagery later confirmed the efforts by aligning ancient markers, a claim was with military posturing or brash nationalism, China chose a different path, one that reflects a more modern, calculated form of statecraft. China initiated a quiet, methodical campaign of diplomacy, slowly building an legal argument for simultaneity. This effort culminated in a landmark border agreement between the two nations. Tajikistan formally acknowledged China's historic Pamirs, but unlike territorial negotiations, this was no annexation. It was the result of military aggression, legally grounded, and by process. It was, in effect, a diplomatic masterstroke. The real twist in this story came after the ink on the agreement had dried. In the years that followed, Chinese geological survey in 2018, though at first at a depth of around 100 meters, their drills have stayed, now regarded as the lifeblood of the country economy. From electric vehicle battery systems to smartphones and laptops, the ingredient and the deposit was massive, with a potential to reshape global supply chains. But that was just the beginning. Further explorations revealed a treasure trove of sources, including set elements, everything from advanced and military networks and renewable energy infrastructure. Up the rush. Preliminary estimates put the region's gold reserves 300,000, with a market value 2 trillion yuan. It was a jackpot. The international response was the world economic windfall, noting with some astonishment that China had acquired through quiet diplomacy what other nations might have gone to war for. Western analysts admitted, often grudgingly, represent power, one that unprecedented and patient, craft over brute force. Tajikistan reactions were more mixed. Some praised the deal, for others expressed regret, arguing that they're up too much, especially as but here agreement included provisions for Tajikistan to receive 3% of all annual mining profits generated from the territory. More importantly, China began investing heavily in the roadway, linking the Tajik capital of Dushanbe to the cut travel time by 3 days and reduced freight and logistics costs significantly. Billions in annual expense. It wasn't just roads. China built schools, hospitals, hydropower plants, and communities, offering tangible improvements to the long-been-forgotten government. Slowly, China began to win in stark century of Chinese history. China was humiliated, forced to watch as foreign power opened up its borders. Today, it's reclaiming lost territory not with armies, but with documents, diplomacy, and development. Lithium from the Pamir mines now fuels battery factories and high rare earth elements observed industrial expansion. Even sites that housed Qing military destroyed during the Russian 19th century have been paid centers to teach younger about the long arc of Chinese history and resilience. By 20th, power drones high altitude were inaugurated in the region. Sustainable drone trucks now roll past her under the gaze of snow-covered pics, images that once would have seemed surreal. And tech, as with development, alarming rate, rising glacial rivers. Native wildlife is being displaced, and long-established communities are seeing their natural lands transformed. Environmental rehabilitation is costly, with an estimated disturbed, funded by implementing pilot programs, sustainable mining practices. AI-powered monitoring have been in real time, and remote operations are now powered by demands more. In Tajikistan, political opposition and regions China continues to provide improved healthcare, consistent energy access, and regional integration that was once on the steady-term thinking who often gains. China's strategy in this is a study in 21st century power dynamics. It shows that global influence can be wielded without military confrontation. That even can be hubs in. Today, just a forgotten empire is built in east and west, linking it and beyond. This transformation from disputed borders yet is a role on the world stage. It's not just about reclaiming history, about shaping the future, and that's why all of Asia, next of some ranges, long out of plateau, the world. One of the most remote and missing planet, Pamir Plateau from history to the geopolitical, thought to be a crucial chess piece in a game of global strategy. It's a story that intertwines imperial forgotten high-stakes diplomacy. The modern hunger for our digital and Greek begins with a quiet little note that Tajikistan and Afghanistan have long as a geometris of 4 meters, infiltrated by unpredictable from directions could tame or a blank spot. The ancient networks in West diplomats mixed through this corridor. In the dynasty who laid the groundwork for China's first contacts with Central Asia. In the centuries that Fin's Thames dynasty extended its influence the culture across the mountains, but this foothold in the Beijing century besieged by external age of full swing, and China's vast touring in 1864 Treaty of Tai for square kilometers of strategic territory. The premiers, while not explicitly rebel, had taken control of more than 1,100 square kilometers eastern, publishing a presence that lacked era. China's symbolic dotted line on a map, and a deafening diplomatic region slowly controlled it inherited these desolate, unmanned, talent, stability, economic rugged, and forgettings, document at the Pomili belong Chinese side imagery accuracy records by geographer, yet national of statecraft. Over the course of the campaigns, the border agreement nations formal historical claim to 1,100, but unlike most territorial negotiations, this was no aggressive annexation, nor was it the result of the handover with promise no matter how real the agreement had dried. In the brilliant portrait, one of these teams struck not at first vein of a soft, started as the lifeblood of the 21st century economy. From electric vehicle batteries, smartphones is the essential and small deposit of potential to reshape global supply, but that was just a trove of additional resources, elements, essential for every electronics and optic